Who are the top scientists behind Soviet space travel? How do they work, and live, and think? I'm Fred Nelman, a correspondent sent from Canada to Moscow by the Searchlight on Russia program to meet them and find out.
Dr. Nelman, welcome to Moscow.
Professor Maciejewicz, I was fascinated by your talk in London on astronomy, particularly the part on space travel.
Thank you very much. Nice of you to say so.
Tell me, have you ever wondered what prompted man to conquer space?
I really think ever since man looked at the starry skies, he was fascinated by it. And he began to think about how the stars are formed, what they are like, how the universe is organized. And it was only since 1957 with the satellite that we are able to investigate space properly.
I understand that you are partly responsible for tracking satellites.
Yes, but I am only part of a great team. Trackers all over our country work together. There are volunteers from schools and factories, as well as trained specialists in universities, technical stations and observatories. This sodium flare was released from a Sputnik, creating an artificial meteor, which made the tracking much surer. There has been great public enthusiasm since our first artificial satellite appeared. Now we can come close to the other planets and view them from every side. We can study scientifically radiation in space, the nature of interstellar gases, the magnetic pole of the moon. When a rocket travels too far to be followed even by the most powerful optical telescopes, we can still track it by radio. This is the rocket which hit the moon. Here it sends shortwave impulses which are reflected from the moon's surface and are transmitted back to Earth. Scientists on Earth can control its flight and anticipate the exact moment when it will strike the surface of the moon. A perfect shot. Soon another rocket goes further to photograph the hidden side of the moon. The photograph is taken and is coded by the electronic memory. The receiving station on Earth puts the coded message through further electronic equipment which translates the message into photographic terms. The eternally secret now becomes visible to man. We have discovered new seas, dead stony deserts of the moon. There is no air, no vegetation, no seasons. Here is a simulation of what the first men to arrive from Earth will encounter. Since the force of gravity is only 1/6 of that on Earth, a man will weigh only 1/6 of his earthly weight. Strong spacesuits will be needed to protect him from this difference in pressure. This is now within the foreseeable future, within the everyday work and planning of scientists.
Dr. Nelman, how do you do? I'm afraid I'm substituting for Professor Maciejewicz. My name is Boris Belitsky. I'm a science correspondent for Radio Moscow.
Very pleased to meet you. I've noticed considerable public interest in space travel.
Yes.
And also, of course, there must be huge resources spent on it. But tell me, what are the benefits?
Well, of course, we don't have a clear picture of all the possible benefits yet at this stage. It would be surprising. But some benefits are apparent. There's weather forecasting, for example. Satellite research will enable us to get a so much clearer picture of weather formation.
For years, we have known the theory of weather. For instance, that the tropical areas of the Earth close to the Sun receive the most heat, while the polar regions distant from it receive least. This uneven heating is the chief reason for powerful activities in our atmosphere. The interaction between these two main masses of air causes the general circulation. But the view from a Sputnik will enable us to see variations in this pattern and to predict well in advance, with new accuracy, the resulting weather pattern in every part of the Earth.
As to communications,
The West, of course, I think is quite advanced in this communication area, and also in miniaturization, small instruments.
Well, Soviet Sputniks being as big as they are, Soviet scientists haven't been hard-pressed in that field, really.
But you must admit, though, that it allows for a more economic payload.
Yes, I'm sure our scientists have that in mind, too.
Well, what are some of the other benefits?
Someday, perhaps, we'll be able to use the mineral resources of other planets to make up for the resources which will become exhausted, perhaps, at some distant date.
That's quite an impressive list. But tell me, how does the Sputnik work? I mean, how is it propelled and guided?
We all know that the first problem is overcoming the force of gravity, which pulls everything towards the Earth. To generate enough power to break free from this force, we know that a rocket may require several stages, each stage falling away when its thrust and fuel supply is completed, instead of being carried on as dead weight. At last, it acquires sufficient speed to break free from the Earth's gravitational pull.
How can man think fast enough to direct a rocket at such tremendous speed?
He can't, but fortunately he doesn't have to. We know that man's reflexes are quick enough to control a fast motor car, even around difficult bends. It requires only 2/5 of a second or less for a message to be passed from a sensory organ such as our eyes, through the brain, and onto the motor system of our body, which must turn the wheel or carry out some other suitable action. In the air, this is often not fast enough. On modern airplanes, we have many devices which receive a signal and send it out through an electronic brain or electromechanically. Take the gyroscope. The pilot can switch to automatic and let the gyro take over. If we are sitting in the plane, we will not be aware of any difference in flight. Machinery does the job just as accurately and safely. This gyroscope registers the change each time the plane dips from its course and passes on the message electronically to a computing device. This appraises the necessary correction and sends a message to the ailerons to move accordingly and bring the plane back on course. Gyroscopes are also among the maze of instruments carried by a Sputnik. Besides the instruments which control and guide its flight, a host of others detect, measure, analyze, record, and finally transmit findings to ground stations as well as to the first group of instruments aboard, which then alter the course of flight according to these messages. Aerials are for radio telemetry, that is, measuring by radio. This probe measures the ion density in space. Here's a photomultiplier and a magnetometer to measure magnetic forces of the Earth or of distant planets. Photoelectric cells measure information and pass on the message in a form in which the radio system can transmit it back to Earth. Power is supplied by solar batteries. We harness the sun's power to keep them going. A photoelectric device senses the Sputnik's attitude of flight and passes the message through the radio system, while inside the Sputnik, a computer is busily processing and interpreting all this data. Meanwhile, the solar batteries keep things humming, turning themselves in the sun's direction for new power.
What's it like for the astronaut himself in the spaceship? With all the automatic controls you've shown us, does he feel helpless, almost unnecessary?
Certainly not. Here is the actual cabin of Gagarin's spaceship. He can steer, radio messages, and see through portholes. In his own words,
now to meet one of the chief scientists behind the entire Soviet space program.
Professor Sedov, you are president of the International Astronautical Federation. It has been said that launching a Sputnik around the moon is equivalent to hitting the eye of a fly with a rifle bullet fired from a distance of 2,000 miles. How can you control its flight with such accuracy?
Для космических ракет в сторону
High accuracy, which was the main factor in the success of the moon probes.
Не знаю, такая ли это, как
But I would hesitate to say that this accuracy was as great as you described.
Я не знаю, каков диаметр глаза мухи.
We don't know the diameter of a fly's eye.
What have you achieved so far in the way of new discoveries by your space program?
Получено много данных о строении верхних слоев атмосферы Земли, о радиационных поясах.
We have obtained a wealth of information about the upper atmosphere, the radiation belts around the Earth.
О составе атмосферы, о магнитном поле атмосферы.
To bring you back to Earth again, can you tell us how this tremendous expenditure of your time and energy interferes with your personal life?
Я в основном занимаюсь наукой.
The bulk of my time is,
Вот
of course,
имеется у меня
devoted
еще
to science.
тяжелые
But
обязанности.
apart from that, I have this rather irksome duty of giving interviews from time to time.
Do your children take after you? Are they scientists?
Да, у меня есть сын, он физик,
Yes, I have a son who is a physicist.
он работает в области низких температур,
He specializes in low temperature physics.
он очень прилежный, я думаю, что это его недостаток.
I think he's rather diligent. In fact, too diligent. It's a shortcoming from my point of view.
To what do you attribute the speed of your successes in space research?
Основное значение имела очень хорошая организация больших коллективов.
The main factors are good organization, teamwork,
Я думаю, что вам еще удастся
and I hope that you will also be able to meet some of the experts working in kindred fields. Let me introduce Professor Kukarkin, who is a Vice President of the Astronomical Council of the Soviet Academy of Sciences, and Academician Sisakyan, who is the Secretary of the Academy's Biological Division.
Gentlemen, I have read that your research has led you to believe that even the smallest amounts of radiation can cause adverse effects on the central nervous system.
Да, действительно, если не
Yes, without due precautions, these hazards are undoubtedly very great. But we hope to be able to protect not only the space traveler, but also future generations.
Professor Sisakyan, how can human beings withstand the tremendous acceleration and decompression and the other effects?
опыты, которые были проведены.
Well, experiments with animals show the effects of acceleration.
These are our chief helpmeets in the new study of space medicine. Ordinary dogs? No, you're looking at very distinguished space travelers, some with thousands of miles to their credit, and feeling none the worse for it. Before Gagarin could safely be sent into space, before other men can be launched in new rockets, many experiments must be made. From his artery, an electronic device enables us to study blood pressure under conditions of outer space. This will tell us the effect of acceleration on the blood system and other organs of the body. A machine produces the same stresses as tremendous rocket speeds. Centrifugal force increases our apparent weight many times. There, so many G's, G being the force of gravity when we're stationary on Earth. Now it's multiplied. Every part of our body becomes several times heavier, several times more difficult to move. We are 6 times heavier than in everyday life. Now for an important change of cargo. This is how Gagarin and others were selected and trained, a new and novel problem. The scientist must gauge the conditions of a man's stay and work in a spaceship, the response he's likely to show during flight.
Pulse rising, respiration growing increasingly difficult. Now he weighs no less than half a ton.
What feelings is the astronaut experiencing?
Well, here's what's going on inside him. His blood is becoming heavier. Metabolism is accelerating until the heart has 5 times as much work to do. Soon there's not enough blood flowing through the brain. This may make him feel giddy and faint. The first organ to be affected is the eye. Everything appears blurred as the blood supply fails. The retina becomes covered with a film.
Your candidate must have a pretty rugged constitution to withstand all this.
Yes, a would-be astronaut must be thoroughly healthy. a man of strong will, able to make quick, well-motivated decisions under stress. Another danger is decompression. On Earth, the air around us presses our bodies in and balances the pressure inside us, pushing out. If the outside pressure were suddenly removed, we'd literally explode. Watch this little balloon grow larger as we climb higher. That's because the atmospheric pressure is decreasing. That's how our live body would also be destroyed if it were not protected. At 5 miles up, our blood and other body fluids would begin to boil, just as this water begins to boil. At a height of 20 miles, the rabbit in the spacesuit is still healthy and comfortable, though the balloon bursts and the water boils away.
Did you select an intelligent rabbit?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we select rabbits who are intelligent and emotionally stable.
Well, how does he show his emotion?
When the experiment is over, he usually wiggles his whiskers. The selection and training of astronauts requires special techniques to find out how far we can adapt ourselves to stresses. We test not only the physical effects of centrifuges, decompression chambers, vibrations and heat, but also the psychological results of being shut in alone for a long period. At this height, his blood would be boiling were it not for the spacesuit. But the future astronaut is as unconcerned as the rabbit was. This is not only a test, but also training. If we've already experienced something here on Earth, it will not seem so strange and frightening up in outer space. Now 2 passengers are ready for the actual journey into space. Zacha and Danka have been carefully selected and trained for this moment. They will be protected from the strange and hostile environment by everything which science can devise. As the rocket gathers speed, continues to accelerate, their blood pressure rises, the pulse rate increases. But the space travelers remain comfortable and healthy. Gradually, the body functions return to normal. We must find the space capsule as quickly as possible. Tests like these improve our accuracy in landing human space travelers and our ability to reach them almost at the moment they contact Earth. How are they after the journey over vast distances at colossal speeds? Space science is still very new. Has anything unforeseen happened? No, they're alive and seem to be in excellent health. We must still check their physical condition. For many days after each ascent, a test is made of the traveler's lungs, heart, and other vital organs.
How about the future? The problem of keeping men supplied with food and oxygen on longer space trips.
Our laboratories have been working on this for some time. One field of research has been into primitive forms of life which multiply extremely quickly. Some of these may supply the space traveler with oxygen and food even on trips lasting many months. This is how the astronaut prepares for takeoff. You're about to see the greatest acceleration that man can so far withstand.
Wow, that's a pleasant little setting up exercise for starting your day.
Oh, it's arduous, but it pays off, as you say. During the night before takeoff, Gagarin slept soundly. On the day itself, His heartbeat remained between 70 and 75. When told they were about to start the rocket motors, he exclaimed cheerfully, "Well, off we go."
What are the effects of weightlessness?
You can see for yourself from this automatic camera carried by rocket. Look carefully. On the right of picture, you can see something moving on its own. It's a piece of metal floating about weightlessly. The dog watches. Her reactions are normal. These creatures try to push themselves against something, as they're used to pressing against the ground back on Earth. But here nothing is stable. They move in a disorganized, frantic fashion, until they discover an aim, to establish a position in relation to one another. They adapt to the new condition.
How does man adapt to weightlessness?
This is a simulation, but we have Gagarin's own words.
I felt fine. It became easier to do everything. My hands and feet weighed nothing, and things floated in the air. Soon, I myself floated too. I worked, and I wrote down my observations. Only I had to hold down the notebook so that it wouldn't float out from under my hand.
Your teamwork has certainly made for tremendous technical achievement. How about the cost in human, individual values?
One of the questions the West would like answered is how much freedom do you scientists have to choose or to change your jobs?
Well, the scientist, we feel, should always be guided by the requirements of life. The scientist is always free to choose and switch from one field to another. But, I repeat, it is the requirements of everyday life which have the final say in the matter.
Has the great emphasis on science and technology in your country been at the expense of the humanities and the arts?
Видите ли, в нашей стране существует полная гармония.
Well, science and technology in our country are closely related to culture and the arts. That is to say, we have a great respect for them.
But gentlemen, I have read, or at least I have heard, about articles in your press. There's an article that was translated for me, The Cosmos and the Lilacs, where it was admitted that there is this problem, that scientists get buried in their work and they have no time for the arts and humanities, and vice versa. And also there was a long series of articles in your communist youth paper.
Well, circumstances being what they are, we can't really afford to have as many poets as physicists, can we? There are the country's needs to consider.
What contacts do you have with the West, with scientists in the West?
I have very broad contacts. For instance, in Great Britain, I have many colleagues in Cambridge University, Professor Todd, Professor Perutz,
Professor Harlow Shapley in USA, Royal Astronomer Woolley in Great Britain, Petrie in Canada.
Do philosophical concepts ever interfere with scientific judgments?
No interfere. Only help. From our point of view.
I see. Tell me, what are your main interests outside your special field?
My hobby happens to be flowers.
And you, Professor Sasakian?
I like very much swimming and hi-fi.
Hi-fi? Very good. Very good. Do you think there is life on other planets? And if so, is it possible there are beings more developed than man?
Well, we have no direct evidence, really, one way or another. Space flights, however, will certainly clinch the issue.
Professor Kukarkin, according to Einstein's theory of relativity, it should be possible for a man to go on a space voyage traveling at speeds close to the speed of light, spending a few years in space travel, returning to Earth, and finding the inhabitants here several centuries older. Do you agree with this?
Well, theoretical physics, it is true, suggests that time will be slowed in a moving spaceship. But we can't really predict the biological effects this will have at the present time. For all we know, the opposite may be true.
Who will be the first man to land on the moon, and could you tell us when?
When, it is very difficult to say now. But who will be? He will be the citizen of our planet.
Thank you. Well, Professor Kukarkin and Professor Sasakian, thank you very, very much. Mr. Belitsky, you were telling me the other day when we were talking about future possibilities that Soviet science fiction is about the scientist's dream today of what may become a reality tomorrow.
Yes, it's true. Leading Soviet science fiction writers all have a scientific background. I could mention, as an example, a film made here about man's efforts to break loose from the solar system altogether.
These scientists are studying the film record of a tragic flight into space. Here's the son of the astronaut who was killed in the flight. This film was automatically taken and ejected. What caused the disaster? The record is incomplete. The answer still a mystery. They decide to send up another kind of pilot on an identical course, under identical circumstances. How will he fare? Unfortunately, he soon develops symptoms of illness caused by excessive radiation. Is this what happened to the young man's father? The scientists work on improving the protection which the spaceship provides. When they decide that the problem has been solved, the son volunteers to make the new flight. This is what the sky may soon be like, filled with space stations which transmit weather and television signals to Earth or relay messages to spaceships in flight. With the aid of retro rockets, he retards his speed to pick up a message from his father's flight. But the extra weight gives him trouble in recovering speed again. He loses contact with the Earth. He decides to continue anyway. Suddenly a new danger looms. Meteors. Tries to blast them out of his way with an atomic cannon. No more ammunition.
On that peaceful glimpse of how you and your children may one day be traveling around the universe, we conclude this program on space travel. Soon we shall return to bring you people from the circus, nightclub singers, puppeteers, satirists, stars in the world of entertainment, which Searchlight on Russia is calling the lively arts. Good night.
Few of us in the West ever see Soviet light entertainment. Who are their artists? What sort of people are they? Do they think like us about art or everyday life? I'm Fred Nelman, the correspondent for Searchlight on Russia. I've been sent from Canada to Moscow to meet them and find out.
In the central Moscow, in Maikovsky Square, stands our famous Central Puppet Theater, founded by Sergei Obraztsov.
Залез! Графей! Графей, иди сюда! Иди сюда!
Ah, Mr. Obraztsov.
How do you do?
How are you?
I'm very glad to see you.
Yes, this part of your theater looks just like a museum.
Of course, it is a museum.
These are marionettes, eh?
Yeah, it's a think puppet.
Oh.
Like this. But we use in our theater another system. Glass puppets and road puppets. That's glass puppets. That's your London, this English bunch. And that also glass puppets. This, his cousin, Russian, old Russian Petrushka. Yes? Yes. But I can show you road puppet also. This one, that's Aladdin from Aladdin's Magic Lamp.
Yes, you brought that show to London, I believe.
Yes, in 1954.
Well, why do you use rod puppets?
Because glass puppets, they can play only comical characters. And this road puppet, this Aladdin, he can play romantic and heroic character. Yes?
That's quite an intricate mechanism, isn't it?
We have many other mechanisms in our theater. Sometimes we have for one role, for one part, 2 or 3 or 4 puppets. That's 2 puppets for one role, for one part. This one can only too small. Yes? Here, what is the
rubber tube?
Rubber tube. That's new word for me. And that he can only walk. Yes?
Yes. Well, I see you keep in close contact with your audience.
Yes, that's very necessary for me. But sometimes our audience take part in
Так
our
сразу будите меня.
performance.
Кричите: Аленка, Аленка! Только громче кричите, а то я до того крепко сплю. Ну ладно.
Tell me, Mr. Obraztsov, how did you start your career as a puppeteer?
In first, that was only my joke, my hobby, because by education I am painter, and after that I was an actor of musical theater, after that an actor of drama theater.
I read your autobiography, and there's a story that in your first dramatic role, you were very shy, and the director suggested that you make a puppet to play the role.
Yes, that's right. That is this puppet.
Oh, he's a very definite
An
character.
old man.
Tell me, what literary material lends itself to puppetry?
There is 2 ways to show life. One, that's directly. Life is life. And another one, that's allegorical. That's also truth. Our actors, as puppets, that's not real human beings. And therefore, our theater is allegorical theater. Yes. Because this puppet, that is child. Yes. But that's not a real child, that's allegorical child. Yes. And therefore, this child is all children in the world. Yes. That's allegorical child. Yeah. That's truth.
That's lovely.
Yes. And therefore, for our repertoire, that is better to have fairy tales, Russian fairy tales, or another fairy tales, fables, and so on.
What English literature would apply?
We have a real English performance that by Kipling, Mowgli,
yeah.
Shakespeare, some Shakespeare, Macbeth or Twelfth Night, Swift. Swift is good for puppets because that is satire.
Gulliver's Travels.
Yes, and only puppets can play that because human beings they can't.
Mm-hmm. Could you show us an example of satirical puppetry?
I can show you one that's satire about poor film production.
Мизмахнут! Да, мистер Фокс! Благодарю вас. Маус, от бедра до кончиков пальцев. От бедра до кончиков пальцев. Стоп, хватит. Пойдите танцуем. Вы свободны, мисс? Вы свободны, мисс? Да. Прошу освободить помещение, мисс. Прошу освободить помещение, мисс. Прошу вас. Маус. Сменить бюсты. Окей. Прошу извинить, мисс.
This is how they measure their talents in some parts of the world.
Прошу извинить, мисс. Опять же 18. Следующее попрошу извинить, мисс. Спокойно, мисс. Попрошу извинить, мисс. Есть! Нога Эллен Рэй, 95. От бедра до кончика пальца.
The artist has a social responsibility?
Of course, like a doctor. He is responsible for his medicine and we are responsible for our shows. If we show the children a puppet who stutters, they will laugh. What do you think? Is it good or bad? That is bad. First, it will be offend a boy or a girl who stutters, and second, it would teach children to laugh at the misfortune of others. First, it will offend a boy or girl who stutters, and second, it would teach children to laugh at the misfortune of others.
Well, what would you say we may laugh at?
Oh, many things. We can laugh at stupidity, at greed, bad habits like drunkenness. I can show you my drunkard.
Я просто готова! Ну, а в этом ни слова. Молчи.
Would you say that social satire is a characteristic of the Soviet lively arts?
See for yourself. Across Mayakovsky Square is playing our very great master of satire, Arkady Raikin.
This is a satire of the anniversary of the opening of the theatre. Writing is showing us the type of people who speak on such occasions.
This is a pompous public speaker. He thinks that the theatre needs severe criticism for many mistakes.
Объявляю торжественное заседание открытым. Следующее слово предоставляется представителю Союза писателей. Я человек простой, я говорю стихами.
There is a poet from the Writers' Union. He's a simple man. He can talk only poetry.
Играть вам не переиграть. Я вас люблю. Чего же более? Что я могу еще сказать? Слово представляется завсегдатаю зрительного зала.
Here is a man from the audience. He's very shy.
He's so mixed up, he's congratulating himself instead of the theatre.
Поздравляю себя с вашим юбилеем и желаю себе здоровья и творческих успехов. Следующее слово предоставляется представителю критики. Товарищи! Я, честно говоря, не люблю смех.
Doesn't like the theatre. It isn't funny.
It's not funny. But when he tried to tell us the plot...
Не смешно?
Mr. Riken, you're known as the man with the 1,000 faces. But tell me, what is your own private face?
That's what you call me. Ну, в этих лицах 1000 разных людей.
These faces are 1,000 different people.
Но и в каждом лице это я сам.
But through each is also my own face.
Особенно, когда я играю и говорю с публикой, это прежде всего мои мысли, это я сам.
When I talk to the audience,
I am myself.
Yes, it's my face.
Well, how did you get started on your career?
Ну, каждый актер, я думаю, мечтает о своей театральной карьере с самого раннего детства.
Every actor dreams about his actor career from early childhood.
Когда мне было 5 лет,
When I was 5,
я сыграл свою первую роль.
I played my first part.
Роль убитого купца.
The part of a dead man.
Во мне был воткнут деревянный меч.
With a wooden sword in my chest.
Я лежал так.
Do you as an artist feel that your function is only to entertain?
Ну, все, что мы находим нужным.
We criticize what we think are wrong. Take, for instance, the disciplinarian. He always arrives at work on time. But what happens afterwards?
Говорят, у нас в учреждении труд дисциплины жутко хромает. Ведь правильно говорят. Ведь вот дня не проходит, чтобы кто из сотрудников на работу бы не опоздал. Кто на минуту,
I tell you, nobody bothers about
а то и
time.
на обед добрали бы
3 minutes late, 5 minutes late, it's all the same to them.
Ой, у его в жизни не было
But
такого.
on the other hand, take my
На
boss.
одну секунду опоздал.
Now, he's never late, always on the dot.
Требовательный.
What an example.
Ой, что это, 9 бьет.
What's this?
А его еще
9
нет.
o'clock and not here yet?
Ну что опоздает? Нет, бежит.
Oh, here he comes.
Бежит,
Exactly on time.
Точно!
Вы аккуратно.
What a rush.
Бежал по лестнице, чтобы
No
на работу
time
не
for
опоздать.
anything.
Да, я вскочил, смотрю на часах, без 7 минут 9. Я шлепанцы надел, пальто накинул в машину и помчался по улице. Действительно, скорее
I'd
сдохну,
sooner die
чем
than
позволить
be
себе к работе
unpunctual.
халатно отнестись. Давай, иди, тетя Маша, работай, работай. Давай.
Hello? That you? Everyone on time?
Ирволика, ты?
You know what a stickler I am.
Ну как, Ирволька, вовремя пришел? Нет? Я опоздал? Нет? Давай, быстро, обойди весь отдел, доложь мне, кто на сколько секунд опоздал. Скорей. Давай, быстро. Скорей, давай. Скорей. Я здесь, у телефона, подожди. Давай. Скорей. Давай. Скорей. Давай.
What?
Ермолика, ты?
No, not now.
Подожди. Сейчас.
Don't bother me just now.
Подожди. Сейчас я занят, подожди. До часу я не человек. Подожди, сейчас, минуточку. Потом позвонишь.
I think I'll take 40 weeks.
Водичка вам подоспела. Ой, глядите-ка, заснулся.
Oh dear, he is tired out. He works so hard.
И чайку-то, небось, не попил, не подкрепился. Алло? Василий Васильевич?
Don't shout. We're in the middle of a conference.
Совещание идет тут.
That certainly caustic criticism. Where do we go next?
For a rounded idea of our lively arts, you must also visit a cultural center. We have one in every factory and school. Sometimes their own people with talent perform there. Sometimes they invite other artists.
Похоже на мальчишку в новой блузке головой. Бежишь всегда при прыжку и довольно ты собой.
This is a song about a girl who had no time for romance. One day, she fell in love. Now she has no time for anything else.
Девчонку на самый тут, ребята каждый вечер ждут, и каждый вечер им в ответ звучит решительное нет. Вы что торчите на пути? Прошу вас, дайте мне пройти. Я никому и никогда еще не говорила «да». Все может измениться миг один в один момент. С девчонкой озорницей познакомился студент. Открылось в сердце дверца, и под блузкой головой забилось громко сердце. Озорница, что с тобой? Ну и тут. Ребята, это неспроста. И та девчонка, и не та. Она робка, скромна на вид. Она студенту говорит: да-да, нам с вами по пути. Нет, могу еще пройти. А что? Я пока в ответ вам не скажу ни да, ни нет. Уж не сурова, не горда, полна смущений и стыда. Ты, видно, раз и навсегда студенту скоро скажешь да. А, ребята, все теряли время зря.
That was a glamorous number. Incidentally, I've noticed quite a sale of perfume, lipsticks, and other cosmetics in Moscow lately. Oh, chai again. Chai. I wonder, do you think there's an increased interest on the part of Russian women in glamour?
Какой вопрос? Мне кажется, что женщины...
I think women all over the world want to look more beautiful than they are.
Is your employment assured and the receiving of your salary?
Да, я уверена. У нас есть постоянная работа.
We're guaranteed employment and a basic salary, and we get extra money for extra concerts.
Miss Dorda, I understand that the Russians disapprove of certain Western sex appeal numbers.
Нам не нравятся песни и танцы с таким уклоном, но мы любим петь песни о любви.
We would disapprove of songs or dances that are suggestive or over-sensual, but we often sing love songs which are just about, about people in love.
Thank you, Miss Dorda. And now, here are parts of the names of three artists combined into a single famous signature. Kukrinitsy. Combined because for over 30 years, their owners have always worked together. Do they think an artist has a social responsibility?
Our early work was directed against the old, the out of date, against what was bad in our life and should be shown up. The sharp pencil can be a weapon to satirize everything that gets in the way of building a new life. Here are the dead souls that Gogol wrote about.
They often draw warm-hearted caricatures of foreign visitors. For instance, the young American pianist Van Cliburn, the French film star Yves Montand, the Danish artist Bidstrup.
What does this collaboration do to their individual creativity?
Well, we like to work together. From ideas, through sketches, revisions, to the final results. Now for the liveliest of the arts. In Moscow, the circus has a full-time year-round home.
Is the characteristic of the circus in the Soviet Union?
Многие наши сцены основаны на наших национальных традициях.
Many our actions come from our national traditions. We think that rope walking developed strung across the ravines. It's an early means of transport.
Surely your animal acts don't contain any social satire.
А почему бы нет? Вот, например, дрессировщик Владимир Дуров.
He proved that even people who were reasonable with animals, so-called natural enemies, can be taught to get along with each other, even with human beings.
А вот еще одна у нас дрессировщица, Назарова.
Another animal trainer, Nazarova.
Простите, пожалуйста, я должна идти.
Excuse me, I have to go.
Can you arrange a meeting with me with Nazarova?
Вы серьезно этого хотите?
Do you really want to?
Yes.
So I wait for you.
Вот.
Thank you.
No circus is complete without a clown. He makes people laugh not only at the other artists, but also at themselves and their problems. Here, Oleg Popov shows us how to beat the rush hour cues.
Soviet artists of light entertainment. To conclude, we bring them together.
Previously, we have spoken about the fact that the Soviet lively arts contain quite a bit of social satire. But now I'd like to raise another point. Some Westerners feel that Russians tend to be prudish and puritanical. For example, what do you think of a book like Lady Chatterley's Lover by D.H. Lawrence?
I heard about this book. Я бы не хотел, чтобы мои дети прочли эту книгу.
But I wouldn't like my children to read this book.
Я также не хотела бы, чтобы прочел эту книжку мой муж.
I wouldn't like my husband to read this book.
We've heard about your security in employment and salary, but does this discourage incentive?
Желание работать
The will to work
вызывается другим совершенно стремлением.
arises from different motives.
Человек счастлив,
A man is happy
когда он нужен.
when he is needed.
Вот он нужен своим детям.
By his children,
By his wife, by his work, by his city, by his country, by people. Only that is real happiness. And only that can be the reason for to do and to work.
Do you have many women in Russia with professional careers?
Нет такой профессии, в которой бы не работала женщина.
there is no field of activity where women are not engaged. We have women doctors, teachers,
ученые,
teachers, scientists,
рабочие,
workers,
ministers.
Our minister of culture is woman. You know it.
Do your husbands help in the house when you come home from work? Do they do the dishes, for example?
О, да. Oh, yes.
Конечно, особенно в первый период после свадьбы.
Especially in the first period of our marriage. But I wouldn't like my husband doing dishes because he looks funny.
Да, я разделяю мнение моей соседки.
I share my neighbor's opinion.
We have apartment in Moscow and small country house near Moscow. My work is garden, snow. I have 15 aquariums, that's my work. But in kitchen I look like an elephant.
With that, and with many thanks to my hosts, I am going to bid you good night until our next show when we do another phase of Soviet science today. Good night.